Hey, I'm Sam. Welcome back to Brickwall Pictures. Today I'm doing a David Lynch tier list. I will be ranking all of his feature films as well as a bunch of his short films and even a couple other little oddities. He does have a bunch of other short films, by the way, if you're just looking for more Lynch stuff to watch. Some of them don't have any posters, so I couldn't arrange them in this list. And others I just haven't seen yet because some of them are kind of hard to track down. They're very old. He also has, if you're unaware, David Lynch has a YouTube channel that he uploads to every fucking day, which was such a joy to find. That YouTube channel is basically how I know what day it is because he does a daily weather report.
It's May 4, 2021, and it's a Tuesday.
I don't give a shit what the weather is around David Lynch, but I want to hear him talk to me every day, tell me what day it is, and give me little tidbits of information, little tidbits of his wisdom.
Neil Young's guitar is so minimal, tasty, precise, and exquisite. This afternoon, it'll be going up to 82 degrees Fahrenheit.
Anyway, if you like this kind of thing, and if you're a David Lynch fan, make sure you subscribe to Brickwall Pictures and check out some of the other tier lists I've done for directors like David Fincher, Bong Joon-ho, Park Chan-wook, the Coen brothers, Martin Scorsese, as well as martial artists like Jackie Chan, Donnie Yen, Jet Li, Iko Uwais, and Tony Jaa. And without further ado, let's get into ranking the David Lynch projects that we have today. So we're starting off with Twin Peaks, which I don't think I even need to say how big a Twin Peaks fan I am if you've been around this channel. Or if you look at the hat I got on, or the shirt I got on is a Double R Diner shirt, or if you look on the wall back there, you'll see a Twin Peaks painting I did. And if you look a little over, you actually see a Lost Highway. That's the Mystery Man from Lost Highway. And then right over there is another David Lynch painting. That's him and his boys, the Woody Woodpeckers that he rescued from that little roadside truck stop. Anyway, Twin Peaks, I'm not going to fuck around. It gets the S tier. And that's even including the little stretch in season 2 that isn't very good, where Lynch stepped away and they were doing it without him, and the plot kind of, the trolley jumped the tracks, if you know what I mean. There's a few episodes in season 2 that are just like, not watch them the first time. On your rewatches of Twin Peaks, just skip them. I always skip those couple episodes on rewatch. But the rest of Twin Peaks is more than enough to make up for it. Twin Peaks is still like a perfect show, even with those couple episodes. The greatness of the rest of Twin Peaks is enough to just drown out the few mediocre episodes that are in season 2. The entire first season is absolutely flawless, and the rest of season 2 is also flawless. It's got one of the best TV show endings ever. Regardless of it being a cliffhanger that went unanswered, it's still just a phenomenal final episode. Laura Palmer screaming, all this stuff in the Red Room. Great final episode. Great pilot. Great feature-length pilot. If you're a diehard Lynch fan like I am, he's one of my favorite directors, by the way, so get ready for a lot of gushing about all these movies. It's worth checking out the international pilot for Twin Peaks if you've only seen the U.S. version that aired on like CBS or whatever. The international pilot was a little longer, and it's basically like a feature film. They wrap up the whole mystery in that pilot because it was made as if like, what if it doesn't get picked up as a show? Then we'll just release it as a movie. So the international pilot is kind of like a movie version of Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is fantastic. I could talk about it literally, I was going to say all day, but literally all month. I could talk about Twin Peaks nonstop for 50 days straight without pausing to breathe. So I'm going to cut this short and move on. Okay, up next is Mulholland Drive. Mulholland Drive is fantastic. One of his best movies. One of his most widely received positively movies. A lot of his movies get kind of like shipped off as like art house, too artsy fartsy, or just too weird and eccentric. Mulholland Drive seems a bit more accessible for a lot of people, but that doesn't mean it's any less brilliant. Mulholland, kind of like Twin Peaks, was originally made as a TV pilot, and it did what Twin Peaks almost did, like what the international pilot was, and it didn't get picked up as a TV show, so it was released as a film instead. David Lynch made it as a TV pilot, shopped it around, no one wanted it, all those fucking dumbasses said no to the Mulholland Drive TV show, so instead he got some foreign investments, some funding to finish off the movie, wrap up some loose threads, and add in some other threads. Not that you can really call it wrapped up. I mean, if you're expecting a neat little bow on a package on a cohesive story, you're not going to get that from Lynch. At least not usually. Owing to it being a TV pilot at its inception, there are a bunch of plot threads that don't really have anything to do with the others, and they don't wrap up in the slightest. Like Robert Forster's in this, and his involvement is basically to look wistfully off the top of Mulholland Drive at the rest of the city and do and say nothing. So he basically doesn't need to be in the movie, but he would have been in the TV show, so that's why he's in there. The whole Winkies sequence where a crazy homeless person or whatever slides out from behind the dumpster. A lot of people call that one of the scariest moments in all of cinema, and it is a great sequence. It's one of those moments where like I kind of wish I saw it when I was younger, so it like really freaked the shit out of me, you know. And then the actual like core story is enigmatic, but I mean, you can figure it out if you spend enough time thinking about it. It's not just like nonsense. It is a cohesive story with some really emotional beats to it. Naomi Watts is phenomenal in this movie. She gives such a complex performance in this. It's a performance that starts off being intentionally like stilted, like intentionally not the best like acting, that gradually gets better and better as the layers are like ripped away from her character. It's a very tricky thing to do and do right, and this obviously does it very well. Laura Herring is also great in her supporting role. The relationship, the whole dynamic between them is wonderful. Club Silencio is iconic. Mulholland Drive, S tier. I promise I won't put everything in S tier. Next up is The Amputee. This is the first David Lynch short film that we're going to get into. Definitely worth watching purely for the fact that it's Catherine Coulson, who of course played Log Lady on Twin Peaks. It was an early collaboration between them. She actually started off as a crew member working for David Lynch. I think she was his first AD before she became a performer in his short film, The Amputee, and then later on Twin Peaks. It's a fun little short. It's very, very short. There's not a whole lot going on to it, but it's quirky, it's interesting. It's definitely minor Lynch. Put it in C tier. Okay, next up is one of the weirdest ones in this assortment that I want to be ranking. It's Duran Duran Unstaged. This is a concert movie for Duran Duran that David Lynch directed. He was like the director of the concert. I'm not a huge Duran Duran fan. I love David Lynch. That's why I watched it. I watched this concert movie because Lynch directed it. Duran Duran, they're fine. You know, I like some of their music. For the most part, it's a concert movie. There are some crazy Lynch flourishes that kept me watching. I watched the whole thing. There's a lot of like superimposing images over the concert footage, including some like really low resolution like clip art. it was very intriguing throughout, so it was worth watching for that. I'm gonna put it in C tier again though. I would say it's worth watching even if you are just a Lynch fan and don't like Duran Duran. If you hate Duran Duran, skip it because it's mostly just their music with some occasional Lynch oddities thrown in. If you're unaware, David Lynch makes music. Like he has released albums, both as just himself, David Lynch, but he's also collaborated. Like he has an album with Angelo Badalamenti. They called it Thought Gang. I don't love his solo albums, but I like them, and they're definitely interesting to listen to, at least once. The one he did with Angelo Badalamenti, this Thought Gang one, is fascinating. I've actually listened to it a bunch of times. It's really great. I highly recommend that one. If you're looking for more Lynch stuff, check out his music. Anyway, moving on to Eraserhead, David Lynch's first feature film. He made it as basically his thesis film, his student film. Eraserhead is like on another level as far as experimental filmmaking goes. Groundbreaking and still yet to be surpassed. Eraserhead, I love. It's up there with my favorite David Lynch stuff all around. It is so fucking good. Eraserhead's one of those movies that I will watch it anytime from start to finish and just be in a trance the entire time. I can't say enough good things about Eraserhead. This is another one of those movies where like if I don't cut myself off, I will talk about it for like a week straight, you know? So I'm going to keep moving on because otherwise we'll be here all day. Six Figures Getting Sick. Now, most people would probably write this off as like just artsy-fartsy bullshit or whatever. A lot of people have that opinion on David Lynch. Some people who even like Lynch would still call this one like nothing or substanceless or pretentious or whatever. I really like it. It's extremely simple. There's no like shots. It's basically a crude form of stop motion animation. It's got like a 3D painting aspect to it. This was one of Lynch's very first things. It might even be his very first film project because he was initially more into the painter side of being an artist, and he still does a lot of painting. There's a good documentary on him called David Lynch: The Art Life if you're interested, which delves very deeply into his painting work and his mixed media artwork. Anyway, Six Figures Getting Sick is like a quintessential early Lynch, and I think it's great. It's very short. It's like less than a minute long, so I won't give it A or S tier, but it's really good for what it is. It's very interesting. Next up is Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me. Now, people are very split on this. What I've noticed is that there are two camps There's David Lynch fans and then there's Twin Peaks fans, right? Every David Lynch fan loves Twin Peaks, but not everyone who loves Twin Peaks loves any of David Lynch's other stuff. There's a lot of people who only love Twin Peaks and they hate all his movies and all his weird other side projects and stuff. I'm definitely a David Lynch fan, not just a Twin Peaks fan. If you are just a Twin Peaks fan, there's a good chance you're not going to like Fire Walk with Me, because it's a lot closer to David Lynch's film work than it is the Twin Peaks TV series. Kind of like Twin Peaks: The Return was a lot closer to his film work than it was to his to the actual first run of the Twin Peaks TV show. Fire Walk with Me was a big fuck you to people who wanted the cliffhanger wrapped up from the end of Twin Peaks Season 2. Fire Walk with Me was released soon after Twin Peaks was canceled. And everyone was like, you're gonna, how's Annie? This whole like crazy cliffhanger thing. And Lynch gets a movie and everyone goes, oh, he's gonna answer all those questions that we were left hanging about. And Lynch goes, fuck you, it's a prequel, and he doesn't even try to answer any of that shit. And I absolutely love it. It's like the last days of Laura Palmer. Cheryl Lee gives such a well-rounded and just devastating performance in this. And one of my favorite things ever, again, like Twin Peaks. Fire Walk with Me gets the S tier. It's flawless from frame one to the end of the end credits. It's a perfect piece of work. It's one of those things I can watch it anytime, over and over again. It never gets old, and it honestly gets better every watch. Okay, Wild at Heart. Wild at Heart is one of the only Lynch movies that I've only seen once. I haven't rewatched this one yet, but I am eager to because I thought it was great again. I don't love it quite as much as the others. For me, it's A or B tier. Right now, I'm going to put it in B tier with the knowledge that I think after a rewatch, there's a really good chance it might jump up to A tier. For right now, I'm going to keep it in B because it didn't quite envelop me in the way that a lot of his other movies do. The plot's a little more straightforward. The whole Wizard of Oz connection felt a little too on the nose for me at points. But, you know, the cast was really good. It's a fun Nick Cage performance. It's not one of his bad performances, but it's also not one of his best, I don't think. It is one of Laura Dern's best performances, so she's great in it. And I love Willem Dafoe's whole part in the movie. Whenever Bobby Peru is on screen, it's wonderful. Him with the stocking over his face and that fucking face is just such an image. His whole Laura Dern scene is so intense and fucking like kind of hard to watch when he's like gripping her and stuff. Really intense. His death scene is wonderful. Everything. If it was the Bobby Peru movie, it would be S tier for sure. And it might jump up on rewatch, but after a single watch, I'm going to put it in B tier for now. Okay, next up is Dumbland. Dumbland you might not have heard of. It's not a feature, it's not a TV show, and it's not a short film either. It's, I guess you'd call it a web series. I think it was a web series. It just came out in like episodes online. The episodes are in varying length. Most of them are really short, but some of them are a little bit longer. They're all shorter than like a normal TV episode though. It's basically a complete Lynch solo project. There's like no crew or anything. It's an animated show, very crudely animated, like very low frame rate, like 2 FPS, you know, at times. Just like 2 images back and forth for a lot of it. Sometimes there's, you know, maybe a few frames, but you're not going to get any like 24 frames a second animation or even like 12 frames a second animation. It's like 5 max. Most of the time it's like 2 frames a second. And it's, you know, it's just black and white, very crude lines. Lynch does the sound design himself. He voices the characters. Dumbland is interesting. I mean, I watched the whole series, so it wasn't like repellent, but I was surprised by how like immature it was, is the main thing. It's like full of like farting humor, like poop jokes and stuff, which I wasn't expecting from David Lynch, to be honest. It's a comedy series, I guess. It's like, but it's like very juvenile humor that I wasn't expecting. It is bizarre though. It does do some interesting things with like recursion, images and sounds looping until their meaning changes. I was really like digging for the artistry, and it's there in flashes. There's something in there. If you can like scrape away the surface, I'm convinced there is something a little bit smarter in there. Very vague, and it's really buried. Dumbland isn't great. I think it's D tier. There's also a lot of like repetition used in a particular way, like repeated lines of dialogue that kind of are innocuous at first and then they get more meaning the more they're repeated. There's interesting stuff going on if you like are willing to sit down and psychoanalyze all the fart jokes. Okay, well, unfortunately we have 2 negatives in a row because next up is Dune, which is widely renowned as David Lynch's worst movie, and I don't disagree. It's not good. It's bad. I held off on watching Dune for a while just because I didn't really want to like sour my David Lynch experience. But I did go in really hoping like, oh, maybe people get this one wrong. Maybe it's better than its reputation. It's really not. It's bad. I'm going to put it in E tier, but I wouldn't be angry if someone else put it in F tier. It's mostly just incomprehensible. It's a lot of just like sci-fi jargon. There's the occasional flash of something interesting. Like you got, it's a really good cast, honestly. Like you got Kyle MacLachlan in there, but it really doesn't feel like a David Lynch project whatsoever beyond those Lynch regulars, beyond those actors. It feels like a studio film where the studio kind of like ripped it away from him. It feels super long, even though it like isn't telling a complete story. It's only telling like a little portion of a story, but it still feels too long for what it is. It's mostly just nonsense for the whole runtime. But there are a couple individual scenes that are okay, I guess. It's not good. It's no good. I'm hoping Denis Villeneuve's Dune is better, is good. And if you haven't seen the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune, it's a really good documentary. It's worth checking out too. Okay, next up is Lost Highway. Lost Highway sometimes seems like the forgotten Lynch film. Like it doesn't come up as often in conversations. And I don't think it's as widely loved as a lot of his other movies. Lost Highway really works for me. It was one of the first Lynch movies I had seen. So maybe I have a special place in my heart in it for that reason. I love the mystery man, who I'm pointing to, my painting of him on the wall there. His whole involvement in the movie is great. I love the VHS tapes like mailed to him and the sneaky like voyeuristic camera footage and stuff. That's all great. The bizarre twist of it, like Bill Pullman and Patricia Arquette, their characters get like transmogrified into these completely other characters. Where it's a completely different actor for Bill Pullman. It's like Balthazar Getty, and you're like, is it the same character in a different body? Is it a different character? Is it like a soul connection? I had so much fun analyzing this movie. This was one that I sat down with a pen and paper and I was like, what the fuck was that about? And I sat down and psychoanalyzed it. I have my theory for the movie, and then I decided I think it's better to just let the experience wash over me rather than try to sit down and like map it out, you know? I'm happy to just exist in the unknown. I like Lost Highway a lot. I love Bill Pullman and Patricia Arquette's performances. The glass coffee table through the forehead is like one of the most gruesome deaths I've ever seen in a movie. I really enjoy the way that violence is handled in this movie. Like just the editing of it. The editing of like gunshots and stuff like that. The whole mystery man element is so memorable to me. I like Lost Highway a lot. The soundtrack is one that I love. It's A or S tier. You know what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to put Lost Highway in A tier, and I think I'm going to move Mulholland Drive down to A tier. Because the two of them are like exactly even for me. So they're either both S tier or they're both A tier. There's some things about Lost Highway that I like more, and then there are some things about Mulholland Drive that I like more. So, not sure. Let's leave it like this for now. These two are subject to change. My A tier is subject to change right now. Okay, next up, let's grab Rabbits. So Rabbits both exists as its own contained thing and exists within the realm of Mulholland Drive. Like Laura Herring and Naomi Watts both in it. And I think you can interpret those humanoid rabbits as extensions of their Mulholland Drive characters. Rabbits is fascinating. It's not a feature film. You could call it a short film, or you could call it like a mini series with like really short episodes. It's like a grotesque distortion of a sitcom is kind of what it is. Maybe like dull, maybe a little boring, you would say. And then the more it goes on, it just gets more and more fascinating as it progresses. The first time I watched it, which weirdly enough, Rabbits was one of the first David Lynch things I watched. I don't know why. So I hadn't like fully experienced this style yet. Like I hadn't seen Eraserhead yet. I don't even think I saw Mulholland Drive yet. I think I saw Rabbits first for whatever reason. I really don't remember why, but I know I did. So when I was first watching Rabbits, I was watching it and I was like, oh, it's just this one shot. This is kind of slow and boring. And it's like I was intrigued by the dialogue, how it's like there were these disjointed conversations where like one will say something and they'll like stand up all rigid and they'll say something, and then one of them will respond in a way that like is it really a response to what was said? And then you realize, oh, the conversation is like fractured and it's all like out of order, these things they're saying. And it was really interesting to me. But I eventually started to think, okay, it's getting a little played out, like it's getting a little bored. So I'd be about to turn it off, and then like the wildest shit I'd ever seen would happen. Like a little fire would start up in the corner of the screen or something like that. So it was wild. Overall, though, it's definitely minor Lynch. I'd say it's probably C tier. Okay, next up, Twin Peaks: The Return. No fucking around, S tier. S tier. I watched the series as it came out, and I reviewed every episode as it aired. You can go back and check out my reviews for that. I gotta say, though, watching it the way I did, where I was like taking copious notes and reviewing every episode, like I was like racing the clock to try to get my reviews out as soon as they aired on Showtime. Watching it that way kind of hurt my enjoyment. I was like, because I was trying to explain everything, so I was trying to analyze it. I can't help but analyze it a little bit. Like even on rewatch, I analyze it a little more, and I actually feel like I have a pretty good understanding of like generally what the story is, what all the different pieces mean, but I can't claim to understand every little detail of it as Lynch understands it. There's still plenty of craziness that only makes sense in a mind as brilliant as David Lynch's. Analyzing it so heavily and taking all those notes and like pausing constantly to write stuff down and then rushing to get my reviews out did kind of hurt my enjoyment of the show. I still absolutely loved it, but I will say when I rewatched the show later on, I rewatched like the first half of the Return, and then I got busy with other stuff, and then recently I came back and I rewatched the entire thing from the beginning again. This like third watch where I went all the way through it again was by far my favorite. It went from even though the first watch it was still probably an S tier, but now it's like tippy top of the S tier. My first watch through it didn't like hold a candle to the original Twin Peaks. Now I would say it's like on par. They're like equal footing. I love it so much. Like every single scene, all this stuff on my first watch through where I was like, oh, this is lame, or it's too slow, or like the sweeping up scene, right? Where they spend, a good like 3 minutes just sweeping up while that song plays in the Roadhouse. The first time through, I was like, well, why is this happening? On this most recent watch, I was like, I love every second of this sweeping. Keep on sweeping that floor, my man. And then when it ended, when the sweeping shot finally cut, I was like, oh. Like I wanted him to keep sweeping. Everything about it. I love every second of The Return. Every fucking second. Every actor is perfectly cast. Even the bizarro choices. Even fucking Belushi, who I usually hate, Jim Belushi. Even he is great in this. He's so perfectly cast. The one exception is Krista Bell, but I don't really think it's her fault. I think it's the character, Tamara Preston. She actually originates that character from the Twin Peaks novels that Mark Frost wrote, The Secret History of Twin Peaks and The Final Dossier. I've actually reviewed The Secret History of Twin Peaks on this channel. I reviewed the book, so check that out. And I will probably have a review out for The Final Dossier at some point. I've read it. I have plenty of thoughts on it. I just haven't gotten around to putting them down on paper yet. I can't overstate how great Kyle MacLachlan is in the show, in all of his roles. It kind of has like 3 parts. You could argue maybe even 4 characters that he plays. He's so good in every single one of these that I was constantly forgetting that he was even playing multiple characters, because he's so good and so distinctive that like there was never a point where I was watching, I was going, wow, Kyle MacLachlan really altered his whatever for this character versus this character. I was just, wow, this character is great and that character is also great, without any consideration that they were being played by the same actor. I had to like step back and go, wow, there's so much nuance and specificity, and it's just so incredible. And if you watch the behind the scenes, you can see him like just flit between the different between Dougie and between Mr. C and between Dale Cooper, just like turn on a dime. He just turns it on like a tap. David Lynch is in top form. The fact that he didn't direct a movie for like years, and then he put out this 18-hour long movie basically. I mean, it's a series, but it's basically an 18-hour movie. I already want to rewatch it, and my most recent rewatch was only like a month or 2 ago. I already want to rewatch the whole thing. It's so fucking good. I gotta move on, or I'm just gonna be talking about this until it's dark outside. Okay, Elephant Man. Elephant Man, great piece of work. I don't love it quite as much as some people do. A lot of people love it and would call it like David Lynch's best movie. It doesn't feel quite as much like a David Lynch movie to me. It definitely does in parts. Like the opening is like quintessential Lynch. But like this is a Warner Brothers movie. This is a studio picture. You know, it was big budget. It was extremely successful. Mel Brooks is a producer on it, weirdly enough. But I mean, he produced The Fly too, I think. So I mean, he's got some interesting choices out there. It's a great story. It's a great John Hurt performance and a great Anthony Hopkins performance. Very well shot. Very well edited. It's a great movie. It just doesn't like stick in my mind as much as all of his other movies. It doesn't have like the heavy-hitting psychological resonance that all of his movies do. It is very emotional though. I'm going to put it in B tier. Okay, next up is The Three R's, which is short form David Lynch. I really don't have much to say about this one. It's extremely short. There's not a ton to it. I'm just going to pop it in the D tier because this one didn't really leave any kind of impression on me. It's obviously not bad, though. Okay, moving right on to Inland Empire, which was David Lynch's last film before he made Twin Peaks: The Return. And for a while, it was looking like this might just be his last movie. You know, it might be the last David Lynch film. Like maybe he would retire or whatever, which it kind of seemed like that was the case for a little while. And if he had retired, what a fucking swing to go out on. A lot of people just don't give Inland Empire a shot. And there are a couple of good reasons why it's a little more daunting than some of his other movies. The first being the length, but the other thing is the picture quality. Lynch started shooting this in that really awful period in digital video where the cameras looked just horrendous. This movie was actually made over a very long period of time, but he shot the first few scenes on that really crappy video quality, that like little awful DV picture quality. He started shooting on that, so then he was kind of like stuck with it for the rest of the movie. Lynch initially just started shooting scenes without having any idea how they connected or even if they connected. He would just call up his famous friends. He would call up Laura Dern and be like, hey, you want to come on over and we'll shoot a scene where you're this character and this happens, and then maybe it'll tie into something eventually. He'll call up Grace Zabriskie and have her do a Russian accent or a Czechoslovakian accent or whatever, and they'll shoot a scene. Grace Zabriskie is so good at this, by the way. I don't think she gets enough credit. She is Sarah Palmer, if you don't know her name, which a lot of people don't know her name, and it's kind of understandable because she doesn't have a whole lot of like big roles, but she was Sarah Palmer, Laura Palmer's mother on Twin Peaks. Anyway, Inland Empire, it's a little long, the picture quality is ugly as shit, but honestly, that ugly picture quality works to the movie's benefit. You might not believe me if you like look at a random clip or you watch the trailer or whatever. You might think, wow, that looks ugly. And yes, it does. As the movie continues, it will bring you into its world, and that ugly aesthetic ends up being one of the movie's greatest strengths, I think. There's only a few movies shot on that kind of like ugly picture quality that are worth watching. You have like Tape from Richard Linklater is another one, but there's only a few movies shot like that are like, worth watching. Inland Empire is absolutely one of them. That bad digital aesthetic ends up being part of the movie's atmosphere and part of its ambience. Inland Empire starts off, and it takes a while to bring you into it. Once you get brought into it, though, it's some of his best atmosphere, I think. Some of his best sound design by far. There's one like scare moment in particular that I think is one of the best like scares in David Lynch's whole filmography. And he's a filmmaker who can get under my skin like very few filmmakers can. He's so good at like really creepy, surreal, good scare moments. Inland Empire is one of the best ones. I don't want to spoil it, so I won't go into it. But it also doesn't work in isolation. If you just like watch that scare on YouTube, you might watch it and go, oh, big deal, I've seen that before. You gotta watch it encased within this 3-hour movie. It's all about the build-up and the atmosphere. You're doing yourself a disservice if you just watch that one clip out of order. Like Lynch would say, don't watch it on your fucking phone.
It's such a sadness that you think you've seen a film on your fucking telephone. Get real.
Watch Inland Empire. If you skipped it, if you were put off by the aesthetic or the length or whatever, watch Inland Empire. It's really good. It's A tier. It's absolutely A tier. It might even be S tier. Honestly, the three that I have in the A tier here, I'm considering putting all of them in the S tier, to be honest. Next up is, what's the full title here? Premonition Following an Evil Deed is what it's called. This was made as part of a collection under very specific circumstances. The full short film is like 8 seconds long. It's only a couple shots. There's like nothing to it. If you want to watch it, it's literally like seconds long. So go ahead and watch it. It's fine for what it is, but it's 8 seconds. It's not really doing a whole lot. I want to pop it down to the D tier. It's obviously not bad. I mean, it's fine, but it's 8 seconds long. Next up is The Alphabet, another David Lynch short film. The Alphabet's a pretty good one. It's got some creepy atmosphere to it. Again, it's not great. I'd put it in the C tier. He's a lot better long form, I think, Lynch. His short form stuff is always interesting, and I always enjoy watching it, but it never sticks with me as much as his features, which I think is to be expected. Okay, next up is What Did Jack Do? This is another one of David Lynch's short films, but it's one of his more recent ones, and it's actually his only short film that made its way on the Netflix. I don't know if it's still on there, but it's where I watched it. It was on Netflix once, but it just randomly popped up. New from David Lynch. What Did Jack Do? It's it's David Lynch sitting down and having a conversation with a little monkey, a little chimp who's accused of being a murderer. If you remember those old, awful YouTube annoying orange videos where they like superimpose a mouth on top of an orange, it's basically that effect, but with a monkey. It's bizarre. It's a ton of fun. It's really weird. I'm gonna give it B tier. I honestly really enjoyed it. I thought it was a ton of fun. I was laughing all throughout, and it deserves C tier, to be honest. Okay, next up is The Grandmother. This is a bizarre one about a little boy who basically grows a grandmother like she's a plant. It's fine. Yeah, C or D. I'm gonna give it a D tier. Next up is The Straight Story. The Straight Story is Lynch's a lot of things. It's his most accessible, I would say, to people who don't like the surreal or the art house aesthetics. There's no horror component at all, which a lot of his movies usually have some element of like horror, or at least something that is horrific, if not intended as horror. It's not like ambient. There's no surrealism. It's his most family friendly. Like, I think it's a G rating or like PG rating or whatever. It's the story of an old man who rides a really long distance to see his estranged brother, but he has no license, so he goes across on his riding lawnmower. And it's just a really simple, nice story. It's interesting to hear Lynch talk about it because it doesn't feel as much like a Lynch film, but you can tell it really was when you hear about his production of it. Like, for him, it was a lot about like painting the sets and the backgrounds and stuff. He felt like his real personal flair in the movie is like in the way the sets are painted, stuff like that. So it's not as much about the story. Like, this is one of the very few Lynch movies, actually maybe the only one, where he didn't write it. It's a spec script that he found and he really liked. I think he said there's only like 2 spec scripts he ever fell in love with, and this is one of them. Richard Farnsworth is just delightful as Alvin, the main character. He's so sympathetic. Like, he's a sweet old man, and you feel so bad for him. And he's got a killer mustache, and his estranged brother is Harry Dean Stanton, who you love to see. So it's a good time. If you're like a diehard Lynch fan, you gotta watch it. If you love Lynch for the craziness and for the creepiness, you're not gonna get that in Straight Story. But it's just a good story. B tier. Okay, and last up is Blue Velvet. Blue Velvet is wonderful on all fronts. It's a great story. Fantastic performances. I think it's Dennis Hopper's best performance. Frank Booth is one of the most terrifying, volatile characters ever put to screen. He's so fucking good. Interestingly, if you watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, I feel like there's a little bit of Frank Booth still stuck inside of Dennis Hopper in that movie. It's like Frank Booth wheedled his way into Dennis Hopper for the entirety of, 1986? And then after he wrapped Blue Velvet, they put him in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and he was just like stuck inside Frank Booth's head. He's like on that same intensity. Anyway, Kyle MacLachlan's excellent. Isabella Rossellini is great in it. Great story, great film, great sense of atmosphere and world building. He manages to keep all of his usual eccentricities and his elements of surrealism and the disturbing violence and like gore elements, like the severed ear. He manages to package all of that in a form that's, I think, more widely accessible than a lot of his other movies are. Like, more people seem to love Blue Velvet who maybe don't like a lot of Lynch's other stuff, where he maybe goes like full crazy, full on-brand Lynch. Blue Velvet, I think, reins it in just enough for like wider audiences to be like, wow, this is crazy, and I still like it. Whereas a lot of his other movies, hit a tipping point of crazy for a lot of people, and they go, wow, this is crazy, and I don't like it. Blue Velvet's, wow, this is crazy, and I do like it. Everyone seems to love Blue Velvet, and I'm no exception. It's a great film. A or S tier. Then I'm going to go ahead and pop it on S tier. And now comes a time where we're going to review all of my placements here. And let's look at the S tier, right? We got Twin Peaks S tier, Eraserhead S tier, Fire Walks Me and The Return, all S tier, no questioning that whatsoever. Blue Velvet, and I just put it in there. I could see putting it in the A tier because I kind of feel like I like Blue Velvet as much as all three of Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, and Inland Empire. But to be honest, I'm more tempted to move all of them up to the S tier than I am to move Blue Velvet down. And it's going to look ridiculous, but I think I'm going to fucking do it. I love Lynch so much. These are all S tier movies for me, I think.
What a heavy load Einstein must have had. Fucking morons everywhere.
So there's my David Lynch tier list. Let me know what changes you would make to your personal tier list, because I'm sure everybody's individual tier list would look wildly differently. A lot of S tier. He's one of my favorite, not even just filmmakers, he's one of my favorite people in the world. I love David Lynch so much. I'll just listen to him talk forever. Anyway, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to Brickwall Pictures for more of my stuff. Check out my other tier lists. And just check out other stuff I do, my video essays, movie reviews. You can check out I haven't plugged this in a long time. You can check out my experimental horror short film Schlaflamang, which was definitely a little bit Lynch inspired. So give that a watch to see my take on, I guess, experimental horror. That's my crack at that. I mean, I shot that back in high school, so it's pretty old at this point. Yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe, stick around. I'll see you in the next video. And this is what my voice sounds like, by the way. If you commented some dumbass shit about my voice in the comments, saying I need a Halls or whatever, I'm going to timestamp you this so you can see how much of a fucking dumbass you are.
Everyone, have a great day.